Hello, welcome back to the David Watson podcast. In this episode, I spoke to David Singer, and I learnt today how a man who is passionate about baseball, beaches, and girls became a world-renowned clarinet player. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, welcome to the David Watson podcast. We've already had a bit of a rant with each other about the state of affairs, and so thank you for your patience as we finally get around to starting. But all things being said, how are you today?
I'm fine. I'm doing fine. Sunny California, and all is good.
And you're in a very nice part of California. The weather is great in that particular area. How far are you from the coast?
Actually, sometimes we can actually feel the breeze from the ocean. I would say about 5 miles.
Yeah, okay. That's a nice...
What's about 7 kilometers or something?
Yeah.
I don't know.
We're miles in the UK. We are.
We
in the UK we're weird. We went decimal in the 70s, but we kept things like miles.
Oh, yeah.
So we measure things in millimeters and centimeters. But when it comes to roads and things like that, it's still miles, not kilometers.
Uh-huh. It's been a while since I've been.
Yeah, we're good like that. We're good like that. One of the things I wanted to just kind of connect with is before we get to the book and the career is how did you get to start playing the clarinet? It is clarinet, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it involves a girl.
As all good stories start with, well, there was this girl.
So I was 10 years old, and I had a crush on Amy Rocky, and I found out through friends. Of course, I could never get the nerve to go up to her and talk with her, but from a distance. Anyway, she was going to enter a talent contest. So in school, Sunnybury Elementary School. And so I came home to my parents and said, I want to enter a talent contest. But my dad, nurturing... well, I'm kind of joking about that. He wasn't always so nurturing. He said, but you don't know how to do anything. And so they figured out, my dad was the local high school band director, and he would bring home instruments, and the trumpet and the violin and the clarinet just seemed to work. He taught me a song called Long, Long Ago. I entered the talent contest, beat her, and that didn't help me any. So that was... so
she was a sore loser?
Pardon?
She was a sore loser, was she?
So I was a sore loser. But later on, we connected again in high school, so that was good.
So, so your dad was... What did your dad do? He was director?
My dad did a few things. Well, he actually had a couple of jobs. He was a teacher, high school teacher. So he taught music. He was the band director for a while. He taught U.S. government. He was a counselor. But then during the weekends, he was one of those guys who would get music from composers, Hollywood composers, and then he would make the first copy by hand. He had tools, and then they would go to the printing press, and then the composer would have the music to give to the musicians to be able to rehearse and perform soundtracks to movies. And so that's what he did during the weekends. And so, yeah, my mom was a housewife, but both loved music very much. So.
But your dad's weekend job he must have done some important scores over the years.
Probably did. Right now, I would be at a loss to be able to recreate names, but I don't know specifically. We were involved with other things. So I wouldn't be able to tell you particular names, but I'm sure that he was involved with some of that. Yeah.
God, I don't suppose there's any of the originals still lying around, is there?
No, I don't think so.
Could you get?
He had a whole chest of tools. He had tools and things. He wanted to teach me, but then, of course, now with over the internet would have been crazy. But he did be able. He was able to make some money with every page. He made a certain amount of money, and he did all right. He did okay.
So, what was it that required him to write to make it? Because I'm not a musical person. So.
Well, the lines. There's five staff lines, and then there's these dots and dashes that musicians have to come to terms with and recreate emotions that the composers were trying to figure out. So, but they all have to be exactly the same. So it's interesting to me going back in his father, Orthodox Jew. His job, aside from studying the Torah, was he had a wonderful script, and he would do greeting cards, Orthodox greeting cards for Jewish this or Jewish that, and that's what he did to make a living in the 1930s in New York. So my dad, it's interesting, went to another thing, but he would, instead of letters, he did notes. So there's eighth notes and 16th notes and 32nd. There's all different kinds, but the important thing is every note has to be the same. Every eighth note has to be the same. So it has to. So he had these tools, and he was able to create such a. It's like a work of art, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it had to look just so, and so that's what he did.
Because a lot of people today won't understand that. I have a friend of mine, and he runs a sort of typesetting company. They're the sort of people in the background that put books together to go off to print and stuff like that. But the guy that he works with, his business partner, who's slightly older than him, he worked in printing presses back in the day when you actually had to put the syllables, the letters, and all of the pieces into a block to be printed for newspapers. And people don't understand that there was a period of time where these jobs that have now been taken over by computers or whatever was a highly skilled person that might have served an apprenticeship, had to work under somebody, like as an understudy, and it was a proper, and the key that people won't understand necessarily is that point where you're saying your dad had all these tools, that there was it was such a specific time in history and a specific role that somebody carried out, that once your dad had done his work, it would have gone off to the printing press, then would have gone off to the orchestra, the conduct and all of that, but there was a man who just stood there, sat there with his bare hands and a sheet of paper and made that happen. And it was a highly skilled role. Do you remember the old-fashioned bookbinders that used to sew pages together and things like that?
Sure. Wow.
And people forget how skilled the people were back then with this, for things that we take for granted today. I'll just load it onto a computer, and the computer will auto-fill it for me.
When I was going to school, I went to the Curtis Institute of Music, which is a conservatory in the United States. They have about a 3% acceptance rate, and it's a complete scholarship if you get in. Leonard Bernstein went there, and Copeland, Samuel Barber. Anyway, so playing the clarinet, sometimes it breaks down. These it's very intricate, the key work and the little screws and all that. And there's someone, if you're lucky enough to find, I went to the Master of Masters repairman. His name is Hans Menig. This very slight man, bent over, from Germany, come over. I think he was probably also from the 1930s. So I was going to this hotshot school, and but I had to audition for the repairman before he would even look at my instrument. He had pictures on the wall of many of the great woodwind players of the Philadelphia Orchestra. He did the people who played in the Philadelphia Orchestra for generations, to the point where once, going forward, the principal bassoonist of the Philadelphia Orchestra came in, Bernie Garfield, and he said, "Hans, my low B flat doesn't work. You got to fix it. Got to fix it." So Hans Menig play, and he wasn't much of a bassoon player. He played the bassoon a little bit, and he played in there. He ended up saying to Bernie Garfield, "Go home and practice, Bernie. You just go practice. It'll be fine. The instrument's fine." And we all had such, we had him in such, we revered him. But anyway, so that kind of gives, so that's in a way. My dad was he did the notes. Hans Menig did he repaired it, that's a highly skilled thing. And Hans Menig, if you Google him, he's one of the he's considered the greatest repairman of woodwinds anywhere. So,
and that's what I mean. It's there's these kind of like the phrase that popped in my head is nooks and crannies, but they're the nooks and crannies of people. And sure. It's kind of like wandering down some old street in a city that nobody really knows exists, and there's a little door into somewhere, and you go in there and there's this rich history of some art or some skill set that if you're in that industry, everybody knows this person or everybody's heard of this person.
Right.
And exactly right. Normally, like for people like you and I mean, you were fortunate you were young when you met this man, but like most people, like, oh yeah, I he carried on work until the day he died in his 90s or something. But I met him briefly, but there's but some of these old trades people who had this particular skill set. It was something that they would have learned as a kid. Or do you know what I mean? Or it was similar to a skill they learned as a child and they developed it as an adult. Right. And then they did that literally every day until their last breath. That's all they did. That's it.
That's right.
And just in a little old workshop somewhere.
I know a guy today in Camarillo. He's an old guy, and he's a genius with leather. And he can stretch shoes, or he makes shoes. He does all kinds of, and that's how he's making. Even now, he's making his living doing. I don't even know all the things he does with the leather, but he's there. He loves his work, and people are very devoted to him. They go to him all the time. So
moving back to the clarinet. Okay, so you win the talent competition. And effectively kill all your chances of love,
right?
And so what develops from learning that first song that your dad teaches you? What developed from there? Was it just a general interest in music? Was it the thrill of winning the talent contest, or?
So this is where it gets very interesting to me. I mean, I had a very unusual, kind of colorful, I'm having, I should say, a colorful life. I'm not ready to kick the bucket yet. So my dad is a teacher. Every 7 years, they have what they call a sabbatical. They can take a sabbatical. So for a year, you can take off work for a year and get half pay. Or you can take half a year and get full pay. The idea being that as an educator, going to Europe and doing a project, writing something about it, and it broadens your perspective on things. You come back a better teacher. So my dad, being from Europe, my mom from Europe as well, they were born in Europe, as we discussed before. We went to Vienna, where we have relatives, and my dad calls up the principal clarinetist. He found out who the principal clarinetist of the Vienna Philharmonic was. His name is Rudolf Serkin. Calls him up and says, "My boy plays the clarinet. Will you teach him?" Just like that. And I'm thinking about it now. How did he have the nerve to do that? So at that time, the Vienna Philharmonic they didn't pay that well. He lived. So he said, Professor Yedel said, "Come on over, I'll listen to him play and we'll see." So I went and I auditioned, and he took me on as a student. I was 12 at the time, so this is just 2 years later. And through that connection, my life changed. He invited me to sit with him in the Staatsoper, which is the one of the top places in the world to hear opera. So you have the greatest singers. You have the unbelievable, you have the sets, you have the lighting, you have the great conductors, And I'm sitting in one of the great orchestras in the world as a kid, 12 years old, turning pages for, not really turning pages, but they give their young, talented students this opportunity. So I didn't just hear one, I heard many operas during the 1961-62 season in Vienna. So I had this opportunity to hear the greatest. At the time, my biggest interest was, of course, girls, but baseball. So if I had become the bat boy for the Dodgers or the New York Yankees, it would have been, at the time, that would have been great. But this made music relevant to me. It wasn't just these notes that were written hundreds and hundreds of years ago. The opera, I don't know your experience with opera, but it's it's about life. It's about
I'm not as I said to you, I'm not a massive music person. I have done some random things in my life. I have actually seen I saw Lucio Pavarotti sing live before he passed away.
Great.
I can't remember
Joan Sutherland, maybe, I don't know, maybe you know her from Australia, but she sang in England a lot.
Yeah, but I've been to Moscow a few times. So I saw the Nutcracker at the Bolshoi Theatre.
Wonderful.
And I can't remember I saw an opera singer at one of the theatres in Moscow as well when it just reopened. And the reason I say it's random, because I'm not that sort of person you'd expect to do it, but I'm very good at saying yes to things I've never done before. So, do you know what I mean? And I was with a girlfriend at the time who was massively into classical music and operas and stuff like that. And I've seen local operas, when you just get a small theatre opera just sort of touring. And whenever I see them, I always take the opportunity to go and see them. Because what I explain to people is that there's a thing about, if you're listening to opera and you're like, I don't like opera, okay, I get that. But if you go and see opera performed live, and there's something about the way that sound travels and the way that I believe it affects your body and the emotions and everything. And when you see a person, often with no microphones or anything like that, if you're in a small theatre, and they have a proper operatic voice, and which they all do, because you're not allowed to go and do this publicly. Nobody pays you to go and do it if you can't sing properly. And when you see that in real life, or you hear a full orchestra in real life, and the way that sound resonates across the floor and into the walls, it has an impact that you won't get sitting on your sofa at home with headphones on, because you're listening and not feeling. Whereas when you go and see opera live, a proper orchestra live, you feel it before you hear it, if that makes sense.
Oh, that's true.
And
that's true. I was, one of the things I did as a professor was that I had a class every year, and over 100 kids in the class called Music Appreciation, and I put a lot of effort into getting them to go to concerts. Montclair is about 20 miles from New York City. So, but these kids had never gone into New York. They were afraid of New York. 2001, they were afraid of what's going to happen, all this kind of stuff, and they were going in college, for God's sake. So I started telling them about an opera where this incredibly beautiful woman is in jail, and she seduces the police officer into letting her out, with the understanding that she would run away with him if she lets her out of jail. And there are these sexy dances, and I showed on YouTube the sexy. Well, they were all at the Metropolitan Opera seeing Carmen. They just couldn't get enough of Carmen. And but that's what opera is. It's not just something esoteric that you see a fat lady sing. It's no big deal. But it's what the stories are. If people saw the musical Rent, was it called Rent? I think it was on Broadway. It's about bohemians or in the 50s they called them beatniks, hippies, living in the village, and they're poor and they're artists. Well, that's La Boheme. That's exactly what La Boheme of Puccini is. Yeah. And so getting people to love classical music. So as a boy, I didn't know what all this was, but it was right in front of me, like you said, live. And I was surrounded by these incredible vibrations, and it was just very exciting.
It is. And it must have been fascinating did you say 1962?
61, 62, that season. The season, goes from September to May or something like that.
But how do you, if you've got a young person in front of you today, or even 10 years ago, to have been at the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra, down with them, listening to the music, turning pages, the people you must have met, like the absolute legends of opera, pianists, clarinetists, bass, conductors, the array of people that you must have met, and the stories. Sure. Yeah, do you know what I mean? As a 12-year-old boy. And I sometimes think that's the best time to meet people, because you've no idea of their significance.
As a 12-year-old, and then in my book, From Cab Driver to Carnegie Hall, that's what my book is about. It's about my experiences playing Leonard Bernstein, Yo-Yo Ma, all these people I got to know and worked with, and so Yehudi Menuhin. I had a wonderful story about Yehudi Menuhin. And my mom was so depressed at the time. She was living in Los Angeles. I was in New York. I was playing in Carnegie Hall with Yehudi Menuhin, his pianist, and me. Full house, Carnegie Hall, big concert. And I told him about my wife, my mother. Ooh, that's Freudian. Yeah. But anyway, I told him that she's very, very depressed, and he said, well, bring her back if she comes to the concert. And so I told her all the way, from LA, she got on a plane, came to see her boy playing Carnegie Hall with Yehudi Menuhin. And after the concert, people were crowding around and long lines, and I went to the front of the line and tried to be kind, and he met her and he took her to a side room, and they sat down together for about, it must have been 6, 7, 8 minutes. And she came out, and it was like she had, I don't know, she was transformed. She had this light of life again. And she told me later it was one of the highlights of her life to meet him. He's such a kind, of course, is a genius. So in England, I mean, he spent a lot of time in England. So the Menuhin School, he was knighted. I mean, he's a big icon from the last century. And I got to play with him. So that's what my book, From Cab Driver to Carnegie Hall, is about.
but that's what I mean, because there's a thing, when you're 12 years old, you don't often understand the significance of the adults that you're with.
Right.
An example, I can't remember the lady's name, but her mum and dad were French.
Is she a singer?
Her mum and dad, do you know, this is really rude because I can't remember her name, and her mum and dad were famous French pianists.
Sadasu, let's see, could be.
But they ended up, I'm pretty sure they ended up at Princeton or something, because she knew Albert Einstein. She used to play in his lounge because her mum and dad were friends with him. And so when she was a little girl, she used to play with Albert Einstein. She was saying there was a story about what she used to always play with his slippers and stuff like that. But of course, when you're a little kid, you've no idea the significance of Albert Einstein.
Albert Einstein played the violin, and also maybe the viola. There's stories that he used to play in a string quartet, and they said they said his weakness was counting. He said, "You can't count, Albert. You have to learn how to count. To 4." This genius couldn't had bad rhythm, and he couldn't count.
That's weird, isn't it?
So that's pretty bad. Yeah.
But so after Vienna, who was the composer that took you under the wing when you were at Vienna? When I was in Vienna,
I had this wonderful experience. Then went to Israel. Saw my Orthodox relatives in Israel. Came back home, and got involved. Well, I was looking for better and better people to play with, and then I went to Curtis, auditioned for Curtis, and the director of the school my second year was a pianist whose name was Rudolf Serkin, who's also a big name from the 20th century.
The pianist.
He had a big impact.
Sorry, the pianist was Robert Casadas.
Yeah, I would say Casadas, yeah. And that the last Robert Casadas, the pianist, right? Is that what you say?
Yeah, it's his daughter that I had on the podcast.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, really nice.
And she was the one told me the Albert Einstein story.
Wow.
You know.
Yeah, that's great. Wow.
Yeah. So sorry, I wanted to, because I was frustrated that I'd forgotten the name, because he was such a significant person in French art, and the wife as well. So, but yeah. So sorry, you were saying, you carry on, please. I interrupted you. I do apologize.
So people, I mean, so I went to this school in Philadelphia, and it was very, it's old world. European, I guess you could say, Persian rugs and Rembrandts on the walls, and very different from how I grew up, which was basically, baseball, girls, the beach. I mean, but I had a talent. And so my parents, by my dad bringing home that instrument, it worked out for me. Anyway, at Curtis, I was invited to a summer musical a summer retreat for some of the greatest musicians. Yo-Yo Ma was there, and I got to play with the best of the best musicians, and then I started recording with the best of the best, and then things happened from there. But the book is not just about success, because I had a lot of obstacles to overcome. One day, I played for the President of the United States, and the same day I had to go back to New York and drive my cab. So I was literally went from the White House, not to the outhouse, but my driving a cab in New York City at night. Not such a you've got guns to your head. I mean, I had that a couple of times. I mean, so it's a.
What decade was this?
So, so it was about 1980, 81. It was right after my daughter was born.
Yeah.
And so I just had to start making...
So is that like the yellow cab?
It was a checker cab. If you ever saw my book...
Yeah. Yep.
So, from cab driver to Carnegie Hall, yeah. So that's the kind of cab that I drove. But big checker cab.
Yeah.
You have them in London, I assume. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's just their kind of iconic New York, aren't they? From that era. And I was just checking that was what I had in my head. Before we get back to obviously playing for the president stuff, there's something that keeps rattling around my head that I can't get out of, right? Yeah. And I'm stereotyping, but I'm not going to apologise for it, because you've mentioned several times girls, beaches, and baseball, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's clearly a passion, right?
Yeah.
How the hell does a boy who's passionate about girls, baseball, and beaches fall in love with the clarinet? It just doesn't make sense. You're the kid that should have been bullied at school for playing the clarinet. Did you know what I'm saying? You sound more like a surfer. You don't sound like a clarinet player.
No, so I think you get addicted to whatever it is, the great, and I don't put myself on a level with Hans Menig or people like that, but some people I think I'm pretty good. But anyway, just opening up the case, putting the clarinet, my case is right over here. Look, can I just show you for just 1 second? So here is the clarinet case, right? Yeah. And so this is kind of crazy. So if I open it up,
yes, yeah.
Can Can you see?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Okay, so opening it up, it has a smell. It has you put the instrument together, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to learn something today. I'm going to get better at playing today. I'm going to be able to play this music better, and it feels, yeah, it's crazy, but it's something that you do enough. It's almost like I don't know. It's like eating. It's very. It just becomes a part of you, and so I didn't stop.
You know what I mean, don't you? When you think of like that era of America, baseball, girls, and beaches, and you're like, and I'm going to play classical clarinet. You're like, really?
I mean, it makes no sense. And
I'm glad you see where I'm going with this.
Yeah, what do you get? Yeah, so it makes absolutely, but there are people, Alan Greenspan, who counseled many presidents in the United States about him. He was a clarinet player. He went to Juilliard. I mean, there are so many. Bill Clinton. I mean, when I played for Clinton at the White House, all he wanted to do afterwards is talk about his reeds and his saxophone.
He was a saxophone player, wasn't he? Yeah.
I mean, there's so many. Condoleezza Rice, who was our Secretary of Defense or something, brilliant Republican. She's a pianist, a wonderful pianist. She teaches at Stanford, but she plays in a group, and that's her passion. They wanted her to come back to Washington, D.C. Hell no. I mean, she's doing her thing, making music largely in the Bay Area. So I don't know. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
no, it does. It does. It's just it's one of those. Like I said, when you play on the stereotypes, that's a clarinet player is not that stereotype.
Right. No, it's true. And I didn't fit in for a long time, and I had a very hard time being at Curtis, where people just practiced all day. I was very unhappy. There's a story in my book where once I was practicing and there was a bang 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 at the door, and it was the fire marshal. Get out! There's a fire! And I was feeling completely distraught. I didn't know what I was doing in Philadelphia. I hated practicing this clarinet. What is this? It was a really turning point. I put the clarinet down in the middle of the floor, and I left. I even left my clarinet case open, just thinking that if it's going to burn, well, then I'll do something else with my life. And I went to another part of the city, a friend's house, and then after the day was over, I came back, black smoke, soot, coming into my apartment. There it was, waiting for me. Nothing touched it at all. It was fine. Broken glass everywhere. Nothing hurt my clarinets. So that was it. I kept going.
How long is that the original clarinet? How does it work?
Oh no. But it's
what happens to a clarinet that you stop using it? Because I don't know nothing about the instrument.
Yeah. You give it to a school. You give it to a student who's wants a good instrument, but a good instrument doesn't last forever. A piano might, a violin certainly does, centuries, but not a clarinet. Somehow when you're blowing through the instrument, the moisture in the wood, it kind of warps it, and it's not the same after 10, 15 years or so. Starts playing out of tune, but you can give it to a kid, for a young person who, it's almost like somebody giving a guitar to a kid, a rock and roll. But they appreciate it. You give it to a school, and they, disseminate it. They give it to kids and stuff like that. So. Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah. So you probably you kind of changing one every decade then, at least.
About something like that.
Yeah.
Now I'm playing less now. Now I perform for different organizations and try to raise money for them, and I'll play for free and that kind of thing. So I'm not playing as much as I used to, but I'm still getting around. I used to go with Orpheus, my group. So this is kind of interesting to some people. we used to do master classes for Fortune 500 companies in New York, the CEOs. They would hire us because we didn't have a conductor, no conductor. So there's 30 musicians. How do 30 musicians practice and put together a concept of playing a piece of Brahms or Mozart or Beethoven and have it ready for Carnegie Hall by the end of the week? How do you put a world-class product together in a very short amount of time when there's no boss? Really, there's no boss. So flat management style, everybody has a voice, and how do you put it together? Conflict resolution, all this kind of stuff. And so they used to pay us to have their first rehearsal and rehearse throughout the week for them, and then they would come to our concert in Carnegie Hall. And so that's this group, this American group, is the only one that I know of in our history that has gone from playing for free in libraries in 1976. I joined them in 77. We were still playing for free, but then shortly after that, a orchestra canceled in Carnegie Hall, and we got a last-minute substitution, and big success. And pretty soon we were playing in Calcutta. Well, we did things for the State Department. Wherever the State Department was trying to make friends, like we were in Calcutta, just as our Iranian embassy in Tehran, 1979, was being overrun. And so people in Calcutta are very sympathetic to them, not to Americans. They were burning American flags, turning cars over, and we were sequestered in this old English hotel, this very big, beautiful, lavish hotel. We had to sneak out of town, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, and they put us on a plane to from Calcutta to Frankfurt. We did all kinds of things. So we went from playing for free to having a 70 CD contract, recording contract with Deutsche Grammophon, which they still perform. They still play our records on what we call Sirius XM radio. It's our national. We have a national cable radio. So and so they play us every day, pretty much, on recordings that we did in the 80s and 90s. My wife said, "Oh, that's Orpheus." No, I don't think so. It just sounds too good. And then ends up being Orpheus. But anyway, there's never been a group that started playing for nothing, a large group, that went from there to winning Grammy Awards and having all these CDs from Deutsche Grammophon, a big recording company. So it's a big deal. So I write about that and what it was like to go from playing for free to suddenly audiences hear us and they go crazy, and we got all these opportunities. So that's kind of a compelling thing as well in my.
How long did you stay with Orpheus?
I started with them, as I say, in 77, and I left in 2013, something like that. 37 years, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
that was.
Sorry, I was going to say, was when you left, was that kind of like to ease into a retirement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I left. My wife, my deceased wife, was also from the West Coast, and she had this congenital heart disease, tetralogy of Fallot, and had to go back to the West Coast. And so I was a full professor. My office overlooked. I could see New York from my office. I mean, it was amazing. But it was, I had to leave because I also wanted to go home. I didn't want to die. One of your people that you interviewed said you didn't want to die in Texas.
That was Alex.
Remember that?
Yeah, that was Alex. Yeah.
So I didn't want to die in New York City, although there wouldn't have been a disgrace. Not that it would be a disgrace to die in Texas either.
But it's not home.
I wanted to go home. Yeah. I wanted to go back to the ocean and the girls and the
beach, baseball, and girls.
Whatever. So yeah.
No, but that's
the Dodgers didn't let me down.
Yeah, but that's nice though. I think there's something important about understanding where the heart is.
Yeah.
Well, and I think sometimes people resist it for the wrong reasons. Instead of actually maybe something inside is trying to tell me just trying to tell me something that I need to be somewhere else right now. And whenever people follow that, they tend to just feel more settled, without trying to be over sentimental about it. But it's often in life, it's resisting that instinct to do something else or go somewhere else that causes you the problem.
Right. No, that's true. Yeah. It's not people thought it was crazy or full, Professor. Who retires from something like that? You can do whatever you want, basically. I mean, not really, but sort of. I mean, it's a fantastic job, and I retired from it because it was time to go home. So,
that's good. Are there any outstanding places that you visited with Orpheus that just like you just still can't believe to this day that you did it?
Well, we were the first American orchestra to play in Hanoi. They asked us to come and play, and I met people there. I met the General Giap, this person who was in charge of the North Vietnamese armies. So this was, we're talking 98. So one of my friends growing up, whose name was Bruce Teague, he was a bad trumpet player, bad trumpet player, but a wonderful guy. But he auditioned for different service bands as the Vietnam War was starting to happen. He didn't get in, and he had to go and fight, and he died in 1968. And in 1998, 30 years later, I was in Vietnam playing music and listening to them, and there was a big thing made of it. I remember it was in the New York Times. They did an article, and they mentioned my mention of Bruce Teague, my friend, and his parents. When I came back to the States, were very touched that I would remember him, and that they saw it in the New York Times. So, yeah, I was lucky. I was not. My number was just too high. It was just a little bit too high, and so I didn't have to. I didn't have to serve. But I appreciate other people's service for sure. Yeah.
That's just the way the dice roll sometimes, isn't it? It just sometimes it's like it kind of, by not rolling in your favor, it's done you a favor, and you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, my dad was, as I say, he served in World War II. My dad was a 10-year-old stuttering boy, and then a decade later, was awarded a Bronze Star at the Battle of the Bulge. So crazy, isn't it? It's weird.
Yeah. I mean, when did your parents come over? Was it So
my mom came over. My mom was just, I don't know if she was 6 months or a year. So she was born in 1922. So her dad, my grandfather, was serving as a member of the Russian army in Ukraine. And that's timely, right? I mean, and so there he was. And he wanted to get out of the Russian army because it's a 25-year hitch. And so it was right at the end of the Russian Revolution, 1922 or 23, something like that. So they left. They came to the United States and immigrated. And of course, a couple of years after that, they ran into the Depression and had all kinds of issues. My dad came with his mother and two sisters and brother. I have a picture in my book with all their relatives just in 1933, just before they came over, and that was the year Hitler came to power in Germany. It's the year one of the concentration camps was opened too. I don't remember which one, but anyway, my mom left with the kids in 1933, just in time. Met my dad, and they started their lives together in New York, and then that same just as I say, a decade later, the war was on, and World War II, and my dad played a role in it. So. Yeah.
It's crazy when you think about it, like what they must have gone through to get here, and then what they went through, just to survive. Your grandparents especially.
Yeah, one of the things about my book, again, I can keep saying my book, From Cab Driver to Carnegie Hall. It's interesting, you learn things. This is the only book I wrote, probably the only book I'll ever write. I don't consider myself a professional writer, although I had some great editors, so that helps a lot. So my grandparents struggled with bigger struggles, one running from Hitler and the other one is, the Depression. And I struggled. I drove a cab, I sold welding rod. I had sometimes to sell welding rod, to make a living doing that. You're supposed to go through a purchasing agent. You're supposed to go through a purchasing agent, tell your price and but that didn't get me anywhere. It was just my daughter and me at the time. And I was actually fighting for custody of my daughter, and we were living in Seattle. I had to literally get up when the sun was coming up before to meet the welders, who were often very protected by the companies because they didn't want salesmen coming through and disturbing their welders. I had to climb fences and sometimes run from guard dogs, to get to these welders, to get them to try my stuff. And then they would decide. Then if they liked it, then they would go to the purchasing agent and say, "This is what we wanted," and that's what I had to do. So I also, and in New York, the same thing. I mean, another time I was in a play with a woman, very famous actress in the United States. I don't know if you know of her. Her name is Stockard Channing. She was in Greece.
Okay.
She was in Greece. She was in a play in New York called 6 Degrees of Separation at the Lincoln Center.
Oh,
She played in West Wing. She was the wife of the president in West Wing, the TV show, Stockard Channing. If you Google her, you'll see who she is. Anyway, the play was called The Lady and the Clarinet. So obviously, you know which role I played. It was just the two of us on stage the whole time. And so I did that, but getting home from those performances in a car that had no business being on the road, it was rickety, it was old, the windshield wipers hardly worked, and it was in the wintertime. So going from the stage with Stockard Channing and all kinds of luminaries who are in the audience, and then getting into my car and barely being able to, not dependable. It's a miracle I made it home every night. So that's been my life. I've gone from it says here something like one musician's story of grit and glory from the streets of New York to the grand stages of the world. And that's sort of my book. That's sort of my life.
Yeah.
So
just for reference, Stockard Channing played Rizzo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly who you're on about now. Grease. Growing up, Grease was one of my favourite films when I was growing up. It was, I loved that.
It was great. It was just the two of us working together for weeks and weeks and weeks. So it was really fun.
That's before we finish up, I just want to kind of just clarify kind of a couple of points. Is there anything you miss, if you think about it? Was there anything you ever missed about driving taxis? Because it's a strange bridge, isn't it, to gap? Like one minute you're playing for the president, the next minute you're hustling cab fares, for want of a better term. And I don't mean it like that,
absolutely.
But you know
absolutely,
it's just like
absolutely. Anything I miss? At the time, I'm just very grateful that there was something that I could do to make money so that we could stay in our apartment. I'm grateful to be able to do that. It was really not great. It was not fun because you weren't guaranteed a cab. There are different ways you can drive a cab. You can rent a cab, but that costs a lot of money, and then you have to drive it constantly. I drove for a large fleet, so you show up. I would show up around 2 in the afternoon and wait, and often no place to sit down unless you're just on the floor. for hours, 3 hours before they will tell you whether or not you're going to get a cab. And if you didn't bring in a certain amount of money the night before, you didn't get a cab, and you had to end up going home with nothing. So then when you got a cab, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I would drive till 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. And I don't know if there's any. I can't think of anything right off the top of my head.
But you know what I mean, because exactly, I was right. It's hustling cabs, because you literally had to hustle to get the cab the next day. If you didn't hustle through the night, and it's again, and I kind of was tongue in cheek earlier about baseball, beaches, and girls, and clarinet, and but again, driving a checker cab. But by the way, when I'm not doing this, I play the clarinet on the world stage. It's right. Just, do you know what I mean? It's just like, come on, you got to make that make sense in a way, because it's just, it's not how people stereotype. If I said to somebody today, or this afternoon or tomorrow, I was talking to a world-renowned clarinet player who was made his name starting in New York, they wouldn't put checker cab as the job you were doing.
No,
you know what I mean? It's just like, because everybody imagines it like this prestigious upper middle class, and all of this, and it's like no, the guy hustled a living, and then and ironically, all of you together at Orpheus played for free, and it's
beginning,
and then it developed into Carnegie Hall, and oh look.
Right.
Now we're going to get. I was assuming that's when you started getting paid, or at least something could start getting covered.
No, they paid fine at the doing the tours and everything like that. It was never really a living. It wasn't meant to be a full-time job, because we had players who were in the New York Philharmonic. We had players who were in different orchestras, but. It was now that was great, and I miss some things about that. Of course, playing with world-class players, and in the beginning years of just the thrill of going out into Carnegie Hall and having people at the end standing and cheering. I mean, that's really fun.
Yeah.
You go from a quiet hush library and you're playing, and then you leave to Carnegie Hall or the Musikverein, or we played in London many times. So it was great. It was great. And it is great. I'm in a play. I was just in a play in University of California, Santa Barbara. I played a Polish klezmer clarinetist in the 1920s. It was a play called Indecent, actually, about a love story between two women who were in love with each other. And it was a beautiful story. But it was called Indecent, and it was banned, and of course the college kids just loved it, and so I get involved still with projects, and it's a lot of fun. Very grateful.
Just quickly before we finish up, where can people find you and your book? Where's the best place?
Thank you for asking. Well, again, you can get this just about anywhere. A lot of, especially Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and I know it's being sold in England as well. The best place to find out about me is my website, which is Singer, my last name, like opera singer, singerclarinet at .com, singerclarinet.com. And if you go there, you can read a chapter for free. My daughter is helping me with promoting the book, so I'm trying to remember all the things that Laura told me, but to say. So singerclarinet.com. And then you can see all the awards and reviews, and it's gone very well. So I'm grateful. Oh, now you hear my dog.
Yeah.
And now it's my sister. Anyway, you don't need to see them if you don't want to see them.
Then just quickly, just my very last question, because I like to ask everybody the random question. If you had a time machine, the time machine has to be a car. What car would be your time machine? Where would you go, and what would be playing on the radio?
If I had a car, a time machine, so you want me to tell you the vehicle? Gosh, that's something I never thought about. What would be my I would go in a Volkswagen bus.
Yep.
And it would be the 1960s. And what is it? No, I mean, there are people I'd like to have met. Abraham Lincoln. I would like to have met, Sigmund Freud, Albert Einstein. But you're asking me a particular.
It can be anything. It's a frivolous question, so it can be a frivolous answer.
Yeah. So a Volkswagen bus, and but running well, and like to go to Vienna in about 1790 to meet Mozart and so we'd have a nice conversation in my Volkswagen bus, and maybe the Beach Boys or the Beatles would be on the radio.
David, that's brilliant. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And there you have it. That was David Singer. And I love the way that he became a clarinet player. And I think I probably went on about it too much. But it's just such contrast to the stereotype. And who would have thought that beating your childhood crush in a talent competition would lead to such an amazing, rich life? And the people he would have met, the musicians, the opera singers, the presidents, the book, the links will be in the description. Check it out. See if you can find the book, read about it. It's going to have some incredible stories. And as always, thank you to everybody that listens, who watches. I do appreciate all of the support. And wherever you're from, whatever you believe, please do take care and be blessed. Thank you.